Hi, this is Claire from Verity Papery, and today I'm just going to show you how I made this card for the Papertrey Ink Block Hop and how I colored the twine for the card. So we're going to start with two panels of cardstock. The bottom panel is rustic white. That's the closest comparison I can find online anyway. I actually just get it at my local craft store. And the top piece is a piece of watercolor cardstock, and it is not cut to the same width as the rustic white. It's a slightly smaller width. I'm placing that on top of the rustic white, just using a little bit of advanced tape glider adhesive. And you saw me kind of pressing it with my finger. I wanted to make it a little bit less sticky so it'd act more as temporary adhesive. So once I got those two temporarily adhered together, I'm going to start wrapping my twine around this little panel. Once I get the twine all wrapped around my little panel, I'm just going to go ahead and color it in using some Distress inks. I'm using spiced marmalade and worn lipstick to color this twine. And I'm just using a paintbrush, and I did the spiced marmalade first, and I pressed it against a large clear block I had. Then I spritzed it with water. I also spritzed the cardstock with water and with the twine on top of it, so hopefully the twine would absorb it more. I find that when I'm painting this, the ink looks kind of splotchy at first, but it all kind of evens out by the time it's dried. So now I'm going in with the worn lipstick, and I'll just kind of cover that up. And so the reason that I'm using the watercolor cardstock on top is because I need some kind of protective paper behind the twine that I'm trying to color so that the rustic white panel, does not get colored. And you could use Post-it paper or even just some scrap paper. I don't know about computer paper. That might be too thin, so the water might leak through. I went with watercolor cardstock because you'll see once I finish coloring this up and I pull the piece out, it actually looks kind of cool, and you could actually use it for a card yourself. So that's what it looks like, and you could even use it for another card, some kind of artsy thing. I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm going to use it yet, but I thought it'd be cool to just use the watercolor cardstock in case I did want to try it out. So I did not color the top of the twine. I just wanted to give it a more kind of ombre look, and I just left it at that. So I die cut some birds from I think it's, I'll try to add this in later if I can't remember exactly, but I think it's Cuckoo Love or something by Papertrey Ink, and it's just a cuckoo stamp set. It's really cute. It has these little birds, and I used the bird die to die cut some birds out of orange and pink and to add that on top of the string. And now, just to give it some extra interest, I'm using some pearls to put on top of the string as well. The orange ones are by Doodlebug, and the pink ones are just by Darice, so they're from Michaels. Or, I don't know if it's Darice, it might be Recollections. That might be the exact manufacturer name. And I didn't really have any pearls that matched the twine color, and I felt that the top of the twine was kind of empty. So I did end up putting some white pearls on there on top of the natural colored twine. But if you had Copics, you could color your pearls to match the twine color. I didn't, so I just used white, and it turned out fine, but it just might match a little closer for you if you use Copics. I don't have any Copics, so I just went with white. Now I'm using a sentiment from the Papertrey Ink Tick Tock stamp set. And you see that I stamped it using StazOn ink on a piece of acetate. I like to do this a lot so I can figure out exactly where I want to place my sentiment without committing to it and actually stamping on the cardstock and then later being like, oh, this doesn't really work here. At least with the StazOn and stamping on the acetate, I can easily move it around and get a really good idea of how it would look. I use StazOn on the acetate because Versafine will smear. I think Memento will. I don't have them though. StazOn is really good for this, for stamping on acetate. When I actually do go in to stamp the sentiment on the cardstock though, I use Versafine. It's just easier for me to use. Sometimes StazOn doesn't ink up evenly. But now I'm just erasing the pencil lines, and I actually let the sentiment dry a little bit before I erased the line right underneath it, because Versafine is kind of a wet ink. So if you try to erase the lines right away around it, you might accidentally smudge the ink, so just be careful. You can either just wait for it to dry, you can heat set it, or you can be super duper careful when you're erasing. But I just gave it, I don't know, maybe 30 seconds to dry. So now I have my panel, and I was trying to figure out how I wanted to adhere this panel down. And I eventually decided on using these glue dots. They're not actually glue dots. They basically function as glue dots, but they're just not the same manufacturer. They're in square form. And I put them in between the spaces of the string, and I had to cut a lot of them down into really small strips because I wanted to make sure that this was strongly adhered to the card, and the just normal tape, the glider tape I had, wouldn't work because it wouldn't be able to cope with the dimension of the card. So I use a slightly dimensional adhesive to kind of offset the string, the twine, that was, you know, giving the card that extra dimension. So I just had to cover this completely in adhesive. It took a while, but you know how obsessed we are with getting it perfect. So despite the time, I got it done. Anyways, just as a note, before I put this down, the card base was actually, I did this off camera, I embossed it using the Papertrey Ink Woodgrain plate, and this is why I stamped the sentiment before I embossed it, because if you try to stamp after you've embossed something, this is just dry embossing, by the way, then sometimes you won't get an even impression. A lot of times you won't, if it's like, if the dimension is really, if it's really there. If it's not subtle, then it's usually really hard to stamp the sentiment evenly. So even when it's subtle, it can be hard sometimes, so that's why I always just stamp first and then go ahead and emboss if I have the foresight to do that, which I don't always have. But yeah, so you can see me peeling off all the little backings, and that took a while too. So once I finally get off all that adhesive backing, I just adhere it to the card, and you'll see me kind of bend it along with the card. That's because I just want to make sure that the panel is bent along the same curve as the card base. The panel was kind of bending a little bit upwards because of the string and how tight it was. So I just kind of wanted to bend it back the other way so it actually laid flat against the card base. Now I'm just cutting off the top of the card. I usually use a paper trimmer to do this so I can get a nice even cut, but because of the dimension of that panel, it wouldn't lie flat on the paper trimmer base, so I had to use a scissors. So usually it doesn't work out that well, for some reason it did today. I don't know why, but it worked, so that was good. And now I'm just adhering the little birds. I used some foam adhesive because I wanted to have a little more dimension than the cardstock panel itself, because the birds are pretty small, so might as well give them some extra adhesive so they stand out a little better. And then the last note is that with the sentiment in black, I felt that the black was kind of lonely. There was no other black on the card, and I don't know, it just seemed kind of stranded. These are just the thoughts that are going through my head. So I wanted to get a little bit of black in there somehow, but not too much, because I wanted to keep the card pretty simple and pretty light. So I actually used my distress ink marker. I used the kind of like the pen end. It didn't have the brush on it, just the pen end. And I put little dots on the birds just to give them eyes, not creepy eyes, but just tiny little dots. Didn't go overboard with it. You could use that that black dimensional glaze if you wanted to, or you could use a black gel pen. I just used the distress ink marker because that's what I had on hand. And that, I thought, kind of made the sentiment not as lonely. I don't know. It just kind of brought in the black a little better. So that finishes up our card for today, and I hope you learned something new. Thanks so much for stopping by, and God bless.